Thank you. Wow, it's great to see so many people and so many familiar faces. Hello. Right, so as I'm Courtney Holm, Vice President of Sustainability Solutions for Invent UK, as you've heard, and I'm really delighted to be here today. It's quite a privilege to have an opening keynote because whatever I say today, you're going to take with you for the rest of the day, which is super. So I hope I can influence you just a bit, and I hope that you remember some of the key messages that we will go through today in this discussion about our modern future. We have 30 minutes together, and in that 30 minutes, we will start to think about solutions to drive the change and the transition that we need in order to get to a different worldview. I have a video. I don't know, I thought we would start with the video. It's a new video. We're quite excited about it. We've been working on it the last few weeks. So if you want to go ahead and play that, and then we'll kick off the conversation and get going on the presentation after that. I hope you like it. I really like it. It's you're seeing it the first, to be honest. Hopefully the marketing team won't be too upset with me. So, let's get started. Ready? So, sustainability. It's the word that we all love and hate at the same time. It's the word that means everything and nothing all at once. First used in 1713 by Hans Karl von Carlowitz in his work entitled Silvicultura Economica, and it was about forestry and forest management in his home country of Germany. Quite a pivotal piece of work, to be honest, and very relevant. I'm a horticulturalist by training, and I spent some time doing dendrology, and he quite informative, still very relevant today, and a good definition of sustainable development as part of a forest ecosystem. More recently, the word sustainable development was used and coined by there we go, Our Common Future, the Brundtland Report in October of 1987. And it defined sustainable development as a development needs that meets the needs of the present without compromising the needs of the future. Unfortunately, I believe that we've let that opportunity lapse, that this definition of sustainable development is no longer within our reach. It's clear to a lot of us now that we have not met our needs, and we are not able to meet the needs of the future based on our current choices today. I think for me, what's important for us to think about is that we are living beyond our means. This year, in 2022, we've overshot Earth's bounty on the 28th of July. I know that a lot of you already know this, so we'll go quickly through this material and crack on to solutions. But what I wanted to understand, and the point across that I'm trying to get, is that we're not making the right choices on our day-to-day lives around how we as businesses and individuals support the transition to a modern future. In part, sustainable development is about people, the number of people on the planet. The first billion of us turned up in 1804. The second, 123 years later, in 1927. The third in 1960. The 4 billion in 1974. 5 in 1987. 6 in 1999. 7 in 2011. And as of Friday at 7:15, getting near to 8 billion people on the planet. Interesting. So if we think about what we've just talked about, sustainable development, overshooting Earth's bounty by the 28th of July, and where we are now with population, and how we balance that with economic growth, I think we've gotten ourselves into quite a predicament. So population dynamics are really complex, and I'm not a population expert, so we won't go into that within the next 20 minutes. It's just not going to happen. But the point that I want you to consider is that while we've made significant progress up into 1987 with the current definition of sustainable development, there's significant demographic transitions that are coming forward with us. And there's a lot of discourse around that topic, whether should we be having more children, should we be populating the Western world more as our population decreases, and then should we think about reducing population in the other parts of the world where population is exponentially growing, as it has done now for quite some years, as we've just discussed, so in Africa and parts of Asia. I think it's time now that we take a fresh perspective and we start to think about a modern way of envisioning what it means to be a successful human, and how those now nearly 8 billion people, I imagine we're probably going to hit it within the next week or two, are going to exist and survive on the planet. This becomes more complex as we start to then ladder in some of the climate change adaptations that we're going to have to start making as well. So as we start to think about climate change and what that means and where those changes are going to happen demographically and geographically speaking, we need a fresh perspective. We need a different way of thinking about the world. So it's time to evolve our thinking to build on the previous work that's gotten us and the progress that we have made up into 1987 on sustainable development, and recognize that the critical challenges we face now require new thought leadership. So what do I mean by the word modern? I don't mean that it's happening today, avant-garde. That's not what I mean by modern. What I mean by modern is that what it meant during the Enlightenment, that we need to revisit modernity. The Enlightenment during the 17th and 18th century was a time of scientific revolution. It was a time of reason, self-awareness, the rise of the individual, this questioning and critique of assumed beliefs and truths that we're told. In our postmodern world, so the 50s, we started to see this reaction to all that reason and all that science and the idealism that comes with it. And the power of the individual started to come to play. It was about style, complexity, me. And that's when we fundamentally turned ourselves from citizens to consumers. I keep hearing this notion, and it's been over and over again, years and years, you can vote with your wallet. I don't want to vote with my wallet. I want to vote with my citizenship. And how much have the powers that be, whether it's business, we're all a part of business, or government, that have disenfranchised us and taken away our power and made us into consumers. The postmodern worldview has gone out of fashion now since the 90s, late 90s. So and academia and also normal culture has said this, that we're undefined now. But all these thinkings that led up to modern and postmodern have gotten us to where we are now, which is this age of information. But no one has really come up and said, this is how we're going to define ourselves in the future. So what is today? We don't know. I'm going to argue that we need a new type of enlightenment. We need a new period of enlightenment. We need to challenge what we've been told over the past 50, 60 years. And we have to rethink what it is that we want to be when it comes to being a citizen. I think that we do a lot of this, and then I see it now too, more with our younger generation, that being an individual and classifying yourself as a thing, in this way that you kind of buy your individualism it's really very distraught. I think that we need to revision again what it means to be an individual in society and why we want to be here. So we've not framed a new definition of where we want to get to, but we are starting to see some themes emerge around this new definition of modernity. And I'll go through those now. So this is where we get to the solution mode a little bit. So focus, it's vital. We've been talking a lot about root cause analysis and understanding how we're going to hit our business targets. And I see it over and over again with clients. They have hundreds of KPIs, just hundreds of them. And then there's thousands of initiatives that they're doing to back up those KPIs. And it makes for a really great report. But none of them are giving enough attention and resources to the things that are material to helping us transition. We're spreading ourselves too thin, and we're not focusing on the things that are actually going to make sustained impact on the environment and society. And I think that we should question how many KPIs that we have and how we're going to hit those KPIs and how much budget we're going to associate with those KPIs. Data modeling plays a part here, and we're starting to do this now with a couple of clients, and it's this emerging area of thought for us. So how do we take a look at all the different renewable and regenerative solutions that are out there and where they sit along the line of maturity? How much, from an infrastructure perspective and from a CapEx perspective, do we need to spend on which technologies at a certain point in time in order to hit our targets? And how do we get quite clear about that? Instead of throwing the kitchen sink at things, how do we start to take a step back and to get very focused and very specific about when we're going to invest in what and how we're going to keep that investment via CapEx and OpEx, and how that's going to directly impact our either net zero strategies or other commitments that we've made externally across the scan of, we'll say, ESG, right? Adaptation. Resilience for me is something that we've been talking about for many, many years. And the reality is that we're not ready for a 3-degree planet. And it scares me. I don't know if it scares you. I'm sure it does, right? So how do we start to think about preparing for the future that we know inevitably is going to be different than it is today? We've started working, there's some technologies that can help here, obviously. We started working with one of our collaborators, Servest. They have an Earth intelligence platform that uses artificial intelligence and detailed modeling to help us understand what a 2-degree world looks like. What does a 2.5-degree world look like? A 3-degree world look like? And that's around, heat, humidity, flood, and drought. And how do we start to make business and personal decisions based on things like that? How do we become modern, empowered citizens to start to make better choices of how we are going to protect ourselves in these inevitable shifts and changes that are going to be happening to us and continuing to happening to us? Collaboration. So those of you who know me know that I've been banging on about cross-sector collaboration for over a decade. I do. I think it's the most important thing, and I actually think that goal number 17 is the most important goal. The reality is that the challenges that we face don't recognize our social constructs. I understand that we have competitive interests and there's competition laws that we have to respect. And that's why I always focus on cross-sector collaboration. But I don't think that the systemic changes that we need to see are going to happen without cross-sector collaboration. So at Capgemini Invent, it's a key part of my strategy, as it has been through my time at 2 Degrees and then also my time at Unilever, and that we welcome the opportunity and we work with clients and we welcome the opportunity for more. So there's plenty of seats at the table if you'd like to join us on that front. But I guess the key message really is that systemic change requires all hands on deck. And if we're only putting half of the hands on deck, we're not going to get where we need to be. We're not going to see those shifts. And obviously, of course, technology. But technology is not going to be the silver bullet across anything. Right? It's a part of the solution. I've seen it be a solution, straight up, but I've also seen it be a hindrance and avoidance away from pragmatism. So I think we need to be really mindful about where we're applying technology and what the expectation is. Although I do know that technology can help scale things quickly, which is what we need. We need to scale our solutions so that we can, again, make that sustained impact that we talked about. One of the reasons why I chose to work for Capgemini Invent is because we have relationships with the world's leading technology firms, and we certainly put the client first when it comes to what solution is best, and not so much on who we want to partner with. So again, quite interesting for us to think about how technology is going to be a part of the solution going forward. And we're seeing more and more really viable uses of technology to help drive some of these changes that we've spoken about so far today. So I guess for me, I'll just wrap up before we go into questions. I'd like to leave a good 10 minutes to for discourse. If you want to help move towards an enlightened period of modernity, please do reach out. We're gearing up for it, we're ready for it, and we really do welcome collaboration, obviously. And I think that's just that's our tagline, get the future you want.
Thank you very much, Courtney. Right, this is the question bit, and who wants to be my hero? Do we have a question to kick us off with, please? As we do have a roving microphone at the back, which is, we have you at the back, sir. The microphone is coming to you. Just bear with us a moment. Thank you. Good morning. Morning.
Not working. Is it there?
Good morning.
Hey, there
Paul
you go.
Brannigan.
Hey.
Sitting at the back, I couldn't actually see the video.
Ah.
The video was very wordy, but I couldn't hear the narrator. I just heard music getting louder and louder. Could you summarize maybe the first 3 points, which I couldn't read on the video?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Did anyone else have the same experience? Maybe we could take a minute and replay it if you wanted. But the reality is that there's a lot of changes happening in the planet, and that we're starting to see compounding issues. So, because the Earth is a system, one thing happens and that kicks off another thing, and et cetera, et cetera. And we're not seeing adaptation be a part of business solutions. We're still focusing on building resilience, and we're still focusing on individual targets instead of collaboration. So a lot of the presentation and a lot of the discourse around today was around dealing with that and having solutions for that, and the video quite represents that. Hopefully it'll be available live soon on our website in the next week or so, but if we have time later, we could certainly replay it again.
Okay, we have a lady here in the black dress. If we can get the microphone brought forward, please. Here it comes.
And you mentioned about resilience and adaptation. How would you tell the difference? Because they're quite similar. So what's your version of adaptation versus resilience?
So adaptation for me isn't about reinforcing supply. It's not about securing supply or securing the way you do things now. It's about changing how you do what you do in order to be prepared for a different version of the future. So to adapt your, I don't know what industry you're in, but adapt your portfolio from a real estate perspective, to divest in areas where we know that are going to be flooded in the future, instead of just reinforcing the foundation or adding more flood restraints. So how do we start to stop doing some of those more preventative measures and focusing more on preserving life and not so much on real estate, potentially?
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lady just to your side there. That's a nice, easy one. Thank you. And then you, sir.
Thank you, Celine. Can I get your perspective on energy transition, about also engaging women empowerment and women resilience? Thank you.
Yeah, you know what? This is really quite controversial. I don't believe that we should all have solar panels on our roofs. I don't. I don't think that should be up to us. I think what we should do is we should be using our power as citizens to get the grid to transfer. So I think we should only have renewable electricity available to us to buy. And I think that the potentially government should, I'm going to say something wildly controversial, I think the government should stop, reinforcing and supporting oil and gas industry in current ways of working. I think they should be investing in the future of renewable, and that we should have a grid that supplies that 100% renewable. And I know that there's issues there, like it won't happen overnight, but I think that that's the direction to travel, instead of asking people to have solar panels on the roofs, because that just will create more e-waste in the future. California is having a huge issue right now. I don't know if you've read up about this, but about 20 years ago, California went really hard on tax incentives for homeowners, and they have now all this e-waste as those panels are no longer viable, and it's an enormous problem.
Okay, that was just the gentleman there in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Ambrose.
Hey.
You mentioned CapEx and OpEx. What would your time frame be for large businesses then to change their approach to long-term, short-term CapEx? Because I'm really interested in how they can shift and what you define as long-term.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. So we're starting to build out this model now. So we're actively evaluating how it works. So we anticipate, from an infrastructure perspective, when it comes to CapEx, right, especially around the renewable economy that we were just talking about, it should be about a 15-year horizon. So if we look at the next 15 years of capital expenditure and the next maybe 3 years of OpEx, how do you start to make those decisions based on that reality? And you can forecast a bit of your CapEx, but to be honest, the volatility that we're seeing now, what we recommend is doing, a 3-year increments. So across those 15 years, we would do 5 chunks. We have a future-facing view, a strategy of where you want to get to, the overall, to get to your net zero by 2030, potentially, right? Yeah, and then what investments you need to make when, and when those investments maybe shift from, say, one solution to another, and how do you gauge when it's most fiscally responsible in order to do that, based on the infrastructure and the supporting infrastructure from the likes of the national grid or other governments, and other parts of the puzzle. It's quite complex, right? Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we've got time for about one more question. There's a lady just behind you in the white who'd be looking for the microphone. Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. My name's Laura McMullen.
Hey, Laura.
Hi. I wanted to just ask your viewpoint on one of the points that was in the video that talked about we need to focus on restoring the planet and not GDP.
Yeah.
Given that GDP changes sort of once pretty much in 20, 25 years, if that, and I know they're discussing changing it at the moment, it doesn't look like sustainability would necessarily get in there. And given that ultimately growth is the sort of has been seen as the holy grail for decades and decades, granted not maybe before that. What's your view on what is realistic about putting that into practice?
Yeah, it's part of the fundamental thing that we're talking about today. I think that Adam Smith is brilliant, right? And he's gotten us a really long way. In the same way that we need to revisit the Brundtland Commission's definition of sustainable development, I think we need to start to redefine what it means to be a functioning society. And I don't think that gross domestic product is that measure of success. So I think what we need to do, and again, it's not going to happen overnight, obviously, but I think as citizens now, not as consumers, we need to start voting with our wallets and maybe stop buying so much. so that it's not the measure of success. So, and for me, I would love to see gross domestic product start to drop off a little bit to get some people's attention, because the more we reinforce the current way of working, the current beliefs that GDP is a good measure of success, where it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? We're not going to get to the change that we need to see. So I think for us, it's about questioning whether the systems that we've been using up to date are still relevant, and I don't believe that they are. It goes back to adaptation as well. I think that as the financial institutions start to focus more on preparing everyday citizens for the changes that are happening, and I think some of the cost of living crises that we're seeing now are starting to open people's eyes to understand that things are going to get expensive. And I don't know that they're going to become ever not expensive again. And is that a good thing? I don't know. I mean, I don't know, what do you guys think? Is it a good thing? Do we want things to be cheap, artificially so even? Or do we want things to be as they should? We've also been talking about, and I know we're running out of time, I only have 40
I'm sorry,
seconds.
you're about to ask a very big question to the world, and we have...
But we've been talking a lot about building and working with some of our partners on a true cost calculator. So how do you finally internalize those externalities so that, you know, say a table that's made out of wood doesn't cost, you know, £100, that it costs what it should cost, and the opportunity cost associated with that tree not being there anymore. So I think we're actively starting to engage with clients in these conversations, and I'm so delighted that they're willing to talk and listen and think. Like, you know, my gosh, the way that we've been doing things and the way that we've been structuring our business models aren't necessarily how we should be thinking in the future. And I know that this is scary stuff. Some of it's kind of kooky even. But I don't think business as usual is going to save us.
Courtney, thank you very much indeed. Can we have a warm round of applause for Courtney, please?
Thank you. Thank you.